And so we've got Georgia and Lauren here today. If you girls want to introduce yourself.
I am Georgia. I'm the Director of Advertising at Social Garden, so in charge of all things paid advertising strategy and execution.
Awesome. I'm Lauren. I'm a marketing strategist here at Social Garden and largely in charge of our organic presence and kind of leading the drive there.
Nice. Awesome. So my understanding, just looking from afar, is that you two, Lauren, obviously you deal with a lot of organic social media and drives a lot of strategy in that space. And then obviously for some of our clients, when we do both organic and paid advertisement, Georgia sort of can leverage what you achieve in the organic space. So tell me a little bit about what you've done together and sort of the research you've done in terms of like judging the impact of introducing organic.
I think from maybe a marketing perspective or within an agency, they can seem like quite distinct business units or marketing activities, where social is very self-contained and content calendars and content pillars and reporting on that kind of thing, and paid might be always on, or it might be supporting a specific event or initiative, when actually if you consider the end user scrolling through their feed, half the time they probably don't even know whether it's an ad or an organic post. They are kind of consuming that content on the same place from the same kind of brand, whether it's a paid or an organic touch point. So I think we had a real turning point maybe 3 or so years ago, realizing how much more we could achieve for our clients when kind of bringing those ideas together and looking at how we could kind of support what each other was trying to achieve. So we've worked together quite closely kind of since then, whenever we do have the opportunity, when we've got a client who has both services with us. One such client recently has been Super Park, which is indoor children's play centre. That's an understatement. Play Wonder World, where we kind of run both activities and find that for events in particular, we need to kind of both tick the boxes of really high levels of awareness of these events that are happening in park, because they've also obviously got some offline touch points too, but also need to drive what's important for the client, which is return on ad spend. And so I'll throw to Lauren to talk about a bit more how we can achieve those kind of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the Super Park case is a great example where we have really high agility. So not only do we have the paid component, the organic component, we also have a content creation arm. So those sort of 3 things working together really enable us to, I guess, fill the gaps in our strategy and make sure it is truly integrated. And when we're looking at sort of, how those 2 interplay, particularly for the example you were talking about, Georgia, we've got a good example of where we were able to use organic, boosting, and then paid, all kind of the magic trifecta to build up or improve our ROAS. That specific example was where we were looking at a particular activation that didn't have a lot of success in the previous year, unfortunately. But coming into the new round, we were able to boost relevant posts to kind of our top of funnel audience and build those lookalikes up. Using those lookalike audiences in our paid translated to, I think, about a 5 times improved ROAS versus kind of our website traffic or our typical places that we would draw from.
Nice. Okay, so we'll have some specific examples later on. But if we start from the top, I guess, organic social media, I feel for a lot of our clients, it's not maybe something that they put a lot of effort into, whereas the paid advertising is like their bread and butter. They need those digital leads to sort of make the sales. But Lauren, what would you say is the role of social media, and what's the sort of purpose of managing your social media in an efficient way?
Yeah, I think the role of social media is really going to vary per client, but it is all about that relationship building piece. And I think people like to classify organic social as purely a top of funnel activity, but I think we've shown that it can definitely be a middle of funnel activity as well, which is kind of giving you more options and a lot more, benefit or ROI on your organic social than what people might think on surface value. I think when we're looking at process and how we manage it efficiently, it really is about organization, as you were saying before. The content calendars don't go amiss. But having that in line with your wider marketing activity is really important as well. For one of our clients, we've kind of brought in an integrated marketing plan that is super inclusive of not just paid, but it's also SEO and all these other factors that help boost organic, or that organic can contrastingly supplement. And I think that's really important to think about how your organic can help leverage and mobilize other areas of your marketing efforts.
Interesting. Okay. So in terms of like, what would be the the top 3 reasons to why a business should focus on their social media? Is it like to build an audience? Is it to get a different type of content out onto their platforms? Or what would you say is the
absolutely. I'd say particularly in the area that Social Garden deal in, where we are looking at kind of big life decisions, as we like to coin it, it is that relationship building piece with your audience. Most audiences take 5, 7. I know now in the property industry, it's more than 12 touch points to kind of get that sale. And your organic is just another touch point for your clients, which is great. I think on top of that, you should look at as a bit of another presence. I think when people are searching now, we're seeing decline in kind of Google searches and things and more searches on TikTok. I think TikTok is nearly the number 1 search platform for a lot of demographics. So if you're looking at visibility and not being known, being present on Instagram, TikTok, all those really important video first platforms is going to be a great asset in your marketing suite. I think the last point would really be about kind of enhancing your other services. As we were talking about, organic is a great way to, I guess, get the most out of your paid, get new audiences. It also helps with SEO. It appears in Google searches. And when we're kind of looking at this Google generative search era that's coming in, where we're looking at 0-click searches, TikTok content, Instagram content comes up in that search bar and comes up in that kind of AI-driven search experience. So always more opportunity there to kind of build out your following.
I think as well, if you consider paid advertising, if you turn off the spend, you turn off all of that visibility. Whereas if someone even engages with a meta post, for example, you can retarget to that user for up to a year. And if they then follow your page or like your page, you can obviously continue to market them through your organic content. And that's the kind of thing that even if you turn off your paid advertising tomorrow, you can still reach that user. It's kind of similar to your SEO being like your personal training. You need to kind of keep up with that in the background, and you can't just put the clips on the make you look better in your outfit for the one time. That is such a rogue analogy.
I like it. So I think a lot of businesses are probably a bit nervous on what the type of content, and content I know is always a bit of a struggle to find that sort of bank of content and images and videos and whatnot to use to sort of maintain a social media presence. What would be the type of content to focus on in your organic strategy?
I think organic strategy really is contingent on video now. We are seeing a shift to video first, and we like to call it kind of the TikTokification of all the other platforms, but we do see it trickle down from there. Video also on Instagram, they've kind of made outward statements that they're leaning towards that. So they're now looking at spreading reels much further than regular content. And on top of that, it is going to new followers or potential followers, so new audiences, which is a great one if you are kind of in that building phase of your Instagram journey where you're a new brand, or maybe you're just looking to kind of refresh your presence. I think aside from video, Facebook is static. So you've got to kind of have a sense, or I guess like a finger on the pulse of what's going to work for your platform and be really platform specific about what you're offering.
Do you have any examples of, I guess, organic type of post that hasn't worked in a paid scenario, and then vice versa? Do you have to think differently when it comes to content in organic socials versus paid media?
Definitely do. I guess if you consider the environment in which someone sees a paid advertisement, is that they might not have necessarily had a touch point with your brand up until this point. Whereas if they're following you on organic social media, or you are receiving that post because someone that you know is following that page, or all of your friends are really interested in this thing and you're them being served that, in a paid capacity, I just target you. I'm deciding that I think this is relevant for you. So the ad's job is to get the click. And so it needs to outline enough information that I, as the user, can then determine, yes, this is for me and it's relevant to me, or offers me value, or no, it's not, and I'm going to keep scrolling. Whereas organic, you kind of already have an inherent level of buy-in in that regard. So the post can be purely entertainment or purely whatever purpose. Whereas I guess maybe a top of funnel ad can kind of be in that regard, but otherwise the ad needs to kind of explicitly outline who this is for, what the kind of offer is, and what the next step is. And there's not a lot of real estate to do that. So it's like every inch of your caption, of your headline, of the overlay text on your image all need to be contributing to that kind of message. That's way too much going on for an organic post. Like Lauren said, the use of video also helps to get across a lot of that messaging. And we have seen, I guess, an increase in that Venn diagram of what will work for both kind of channels as a result of that.
Yeah, I'd 100% agree. I think the further down the funnel you get, the less it becomes organic, and it definitely should stay off your page in that regard and leave it to the paid side of things. But we do see, I guess, a little bit of reciprocal benefit in using organic as a testing ground for top of funnel assets, particularly awareness building assets, or like we were saying before, building those lookalike audiences for things that you might want to retarget down the track. Definitely play in that space with organic, try new things, use it as a testing ground. You can be a lot more experimental than what you would push out on your paid. So there's an opportunity to make the most of that.
I think that's a great tip in general, to use organic socials more as your testing ground, because like you said, it might feel like a risky step to try a new asset that you haven't tried before, and it's a little bit sort of out of the box of what you normally do, but it can, I assume, generate great results and insights to leverage as part of the paid advertisement as well later on. So great. So if we look at a little bit further, I guess, on how we can align paid and organic content, we have this quite compelling bar chart. Would you like to talk us through this one? Because I know that you both worked collaboratively on this.
Yeah, absolutely. I can provide a little bit of context around this client. So we started with this client and we were actually working on sort of a range of this client's properties throughout Melbourne and Victoria. And we started with an organic social presence that was largely based on Instagram and Facebook. And we were really starting from not ground zero. They did have an established presence on Facebook, but it had kind of been neglected for some time. So really getting and looking at a completely disengaged audience, essentially. And so you can kind of see in that first January to June component there, we were quite low in our paid as well. And our ability to kind of be posting consistently, building up that presence and looking at what our audience responded to really led to improvements across the board, not just isolated to the organic context.
And what we can see in the graph over here on the right is a comparison from H1 to H2 around conversion, so lead volume in the blue and then conversion rate there in the red. What we saw is that, I guess, a twofold kind of benefit from having that continuity between the paid and the organic in terms of audiences. We saw retargeting audiences built off Facebook engagement improve because content was relevant and served a purpose beyond just this is an entertaining post. But like Lauren said, we're starting from near ground zero. So we saw some quick wins there, but also the lookalike content as well. And I think what's probably a fine balance to strike, particularly in these bigger life decision verticals such as property or education, you almost have two audiences that you're serving. You have your existing students or your existing residents in a community or in a building, as well as people considering your institute and your project, whatever it might be. So if you lean kind of too heavily into either one of those, especially in an audience or a retargeting capacity, you kind of drain that well pretty quick in terms of their new and ongoing opportunities. And so we found that investing kind of both of those equally improves the quality of the lookalike audiences, meaning we can then scale those from prospecting and finding new audiences kind of perspective, as well as growing this really kind of engaged consideration audience in the retargeting. And that's what drives especially those conversion rate increases, as opposed to having to invest really heavily into top of funnel advertising and then not necessarily being able to draw that correlation throughout the funnel to those bottom funnel conversions.
Yeah, amazing, because it's quite the jump. And like you said, from a quality of an audience, which we all want, you don't necessarily need to pay a lot of money to get that quality and branded touchpoint audience, which you can leverage then in your paid media advertising. Cool. What are some specific metrics or signs that you can look at to see whether or not your organic social media presence is impacting your paid media advertisement?
What we do a lot of in terms of audience building from a page engagement perspective is to use video. So obviously, as Lauren said earlier, we're leaning more and more into video content, and that's actually great for us from a paid capacity in that we can create audiences not just from people who have viewed a video, but we can do people who have viewed a specific video. We can do people who viewed a video for a certain duration or a certain period of time. So we can distinguish not just how many people are being reached by the content and how that's growing over time, but also what percentage of those people are actually really engaging with the content, because it's all well and good for a video to load in my feed. But I have ADHD. I'm scrolling pretty quick. So when we can kind of get those considered view audiences and we can track their growth over time, that's also when we're able to kind of see those more bottom of funnel impacts like these graphs here. And that's something, again, that we can directly attribute to the improvement in the organic content and its performance, again, as opposed to website traffic or any prospecting activity. We have macro factors like interest rate changes in the property market, for example, or changes to international student caps on the education side that can impact those kind of things, whereas it's a really straight and pretty hard to argue with connection that we can draw using things like that.
Yeah, and I think to extend on that, it is really about collaboration between the two teams, in that we know that paid will have very direct kind of outcomes that they're looking for or certain areas they're looking to promote, and we can really support that in organic. So creating content, specifically video content that is really curated to our objectives down the line, allow us to sort of build those audiences out with a lot of intention.
Would you say, because I would imagine that one of the benefits of keeping organic and paid sort of collaborative and having that sort of, in our case, the same agency doing both, is it important to align, I guess, the type of ads and messaging that you run in your organic social media with your paid ads as well? Or is it, how aligned does that need to be, essentially?
I think there's definitely free license to do what you want on the organic sphere. Your paid is always going to have different objectives that are potentially more sales driven. Even the themes within the paid are often quite distinctly different. Sometimes with some of our communities, we like to look at organic as a place for community building. So there will be a lot of softer messaging. There'll be things that would never sort of bleed into the paid in terms of themes. However, we can, as I was mentioning before, kind of use tactical support to empower our paid, and whether that's making specific videos that do align with certain themes throughout the year in order for them to be able to build their audiences, or whether it's a case of just kind of looking like a cohesive structure, particularly when we start to bring the boosting into it. That can always add another layer to the mix.
Another thing that works really well in that regard, as Lauren touched on earlier, we have content creation arm to the business, and even having like a brand avatar or someone who appears in both the organic content and then in specific paid assets. It helps with that recognition again as you're scrolling, and helps someone who is in that kind of warm organic audience to then recognize this as an extension of that content and help place it again, as opposed to just kind of scrolling through mindlessly. So having that kind of continuity or that visual cohesion to the assets as well is a lot easier, obviously, when it's all being done under one roof.
Yeah, nice. That is actually a great segue into the next slide, which we're going to look at a specific example. And Lauren, you touched on this example, I think, before, where the first round wasn't as successful. But in the second round, when you sort of align that organic and paid effort, we saw better results. So would you mind taking us through, I guess, this slide and this example?
Obviously, we were running sort of our standard static assets, our sort of lead generation piece, where we were looking to drive people to purchase tickets for this particular event. We didn't, in the first iteration, have much support. We kind of had posts going out on our social media, but not with any sort of targeted intention. And coming into the next round, we created a video asset that was pushed out on Instagram Reels, and we actually strategically boost this one. So with boosting, we're sort of able to get just a bit more reach, a bit more, I guess, growth on that particular asset, and boosting with the intention of engagement. So for Reels, engagements is a little bit misleading in that it does sort of gear the project for the asset, to have 2-second views rather than a like or a comment or what you would typically expect out of a static asset. And boosting that enabled us to kind of tap into these new audiences and build up things for the paid. So I'll let Georgia touch on that.
Think as well, thinking back to what I said before about the ads job is to get the click. This event had a lot going on. If I was 10 years old, I would have loved to be there. But had a lot going on, and this client of ours is relatively new to the Australian market. So there's still, in terms of a prospecting audience, not a high level of familiarity with what the offering is, let alone for the event. So that's a lot to try and pack into an ad. So we saw again that the video was kind of a really low barrier way to get people engaged with both of those things at the same time. We're able to build quite a really engaging video asset that did all of that kind of heavy lifting in terms of the information that needed to be communicated. Then we were able to build audiences off people who viewed at different stages of that video. So we did still utilize the 2-second views, given that we had kind of a large pool of people who are at least somewhat aware of the event, even if they did only look at it for 2 seconds, as well as that more engaged audience as well who viewed it for the duration of the video. So we then had kind of 2 additional retargeting streams that we could then run kind of alongside our other activity for the event. We're able to also compare the difference in terms of that initial engagement and how that then translated to sales-based outcomes down the funnel. And again, saw that through optimizing towards people who are kind of engaged with the whole video, that did directly translate to return on ad spend and a lot of happy children on the night.
Great. I think it's an amazing tactic to use, especially for ticketed events. And obviously in the education and property space, there's a lot of open houses or events or go and visit the community. So it's a great strategy example of when you can use organic and paid in cohesively.
Definitely. And I think to what Lauren said before as well, it's about the intention that starts with the organic asset for a particular outcome. If this was an always on kind of campaign, we can kind of utilize any and all social engagement, and that's great. But when we have a specific outcome that we want to drive, it needs to have that intention at every touch point in the journey. And that's how we're able to use retargeting audiences specific to that organic content, as opposed to just anyone who's liked firing that's appeared on this page in the last 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. As people who had expressed at least some level of interest in this specific event. And that was a way that we're obviously able to take a relatively small ad spend in the grand scheme of things and have it pay for itself many times over with just a bit of a tweak to the strategy.
Yeah. And I think when we look at the type of asset that we're producing for that purpose, it doesn't necessarily have to be what you would expect that sort of ad to be, like a buy now or anything like that. When we're looking at how we push that message on organic, it can be fun, it can be trendy. You can see the example we used kind of capitalized on a trend that was going at the time. And that's really important. We want to, when we're talking about making it engaging, we're talking about relevancy and really hooking the audience in with something that they would expect on that platform.
Amazing. I guess that was pretty much it. All the questions that I had prepared. Are there any final reflections or final tips that you want to share?
I think that probably the thing that this whole conversation just really highlights the importance of is agility and proactivity in both a paid and an organic strategy. There's nothing worse than when you want to bring a trend to a client, for example, and because it has to go through so many levels of approval, it's like December and you're like, hey guys, have you heard about Brat Summer? You do really need to be agile and to be willing to test things out. And as Lauren said, organics are great testing ground to that. Is you really get out of it what you put back in, and there's so much that you can get out of it. So why wouldn't you invest in putting in?
Yeah, I also think it's like it's there one day, but the next day it's gone. It's actually not that big of a risk to try.
No one's remembering that post that you made 3 months.
No, exactly. Great. What about you, Lauren?
Yeah, I think just to kind of echo that, I think organic should really be a testing ground for what you're trying or what maybe you're reserved to try. I think the answer is always go for it when you're looking at your organic, particularly with the amount of creatives that are out there at the moment. And we do see a lot of lagging among brands, I guess, and missing out on these awesome opportunities to kind of build up their paid social as a byproduct where maybe they are a little bit slow or the hesitancy's there. And we see these great creators on TikTok. We've got kind of a saying within the business that it comes from the bottom up nearly. And typically you see with your big ads that there is kind of like your Super Bowls in different places where there is amazing creative going on and then that trickles down. And TikTok and these sort of other social media platforms are almost the opposite of that, where it's kind of coming from the bottom, and there are great creators out there who you should be looking at and should be copying with a lot of agility. And I think the best case scenarios are the ones we have a lot of trust with the client. So the client's kind of trusting us to make the best call. And even if they don't fully understand it, or we're putting Sabrina Carpenter on their line, they're kind of trusting us to make that call, and that is good for their audience.
Yeah, because I imagine that sort of speed to market becomes more, is key when you got trust. So, I think that's it.
Thanks for having us, Vic.
Yeah. Thanks for coming.